Hello, friends and colleagues. Welcome to the Tourism Skillshop, hosted by State of Washington Tourism, SWT. My name is Matthew Ozuna, and I am the Destination Development Manager at SWT. I will introduce today's webinar on geolocation data. Please utilize the chat and say hello. Let us know where you're zooming in from today. Feel free to share your comments in the chat and use the Q&A feature as well. Marianne Graff will also be joining us today. She is the content manager at SWT. Marianne will monitor the chat and help address any questions from the audience near the end of the webinar. But feel free, if there's a question that pops into your mind at any point during the webinar, feel free to put that in the chat, and we may address it if it's super relevant in the moment, or we'll get to it at the end. Now, let me tell you a little bit more about the Tourism Skillshop. It is one of many industry educational programs from State of Washington Tourism. The webinar series will engage with colleagues across the tourism sector and broaden their industry knowledge, skills, and network. Each webinar will highlight a specific issue or skill for tourism professionals to ponder and discuss with industry experts. State of Washington Tourism will host live webinars of the Tourism Skillshop on the 3rd or 4th Thursday of every month from 10 to 11 a.m. These webinars are free and open to all tourism stakeholders. The webinars will also be recorded and shared with registrants as well as other users on the SWT YouTube channel. For Tourism Skillshop and other industry updates, visit the SWT industry website, sign up for the Industry Update newsletter, and follow SWT on LinkedIn.
Matt, I'm just going to pop in really fast. The chat is disabled.
Oh, no.
It appears. And so let's get that up. And once that is running, I will put in some links to our industry newsletter and our industry Facebook group.
Okay. The chat should be enabled now. Double checking.
If anyone wants to introduce themselves and say where they're zooming in from in chat, that'll kind of help us determine if that's up and running.
Sorry about that, folks. Let's pivot and talk about today's webinar on geolocation data. This webinar in the Tourism Skillshop will examine geolocation data. Many insights can be gleaned from geolocation data, not before devoting plenty of time and practice to its interpretation. There are limitations and complexities associated with geolocation data, but with the proper care and understanding, marketers can learn more about the whereabouts and behavior of potential customers. It can help tourism professionals guide marketing strategy, measure results, and optimize profits. This webinar will feature 5 guest speakers with a host of practical knowledge on geolocation data. Molly Spector and Lauren Rogers from Datafy will provide an overview of geolocation data for webinar attendees, including data collection, privacy protection, and visitor trends. Tourism research and data expert, Steve Halasz, will share his tips and best practices for analyzing and interpreting geolocation data. And finally, we will learn from Matt Wakefield and Andi Day, and we'll learn how Matt Wakefield and Andi Day utilize geolocation data in advertising and stakeholder reports. Let me just backtrack a little bit and thank Molly and Lauren for joining us today. Molly, you're joining us from Seattle, Washington, so it's great to have a local body working for Datafy and helping with local clients. And Molly, your title for the audience is you're the client expert director. And Lauren,
client experience director.
Oh, excuse me, it's client experience director. I'm sorry. And Lauren, you are the chief experience officer. And Lauren, you're beaming in from Southern California. It's always a pleasure to talk to you and Molly. Just a little background on Steve.
Matt, sorry, the chat's still disabled. It's only for panelists that it seems to be working.
Okay. I'm sorry, I don't know what's happening.
If this continues, you can just drop questions in the Q&A, and that will serve as the chat function for my purposes, but it would be great if people could have the chat function.
Oh, let's see here. Panelists.
Sorry, everyone, for the technical difficulties.
Attendees. Okay, here it is. I'm sorry. Panelists can chat with hosts and panelists, so everyone. Okay, there's that. And okay, now try. I'm so sorry. Sorry for the technical difficulties today,
Yes,
folks. Okay, is it
we
working?
have liftoff.
Yay!
Excellent.
Oh, excellent.
Thanks,
So
Matt.
sorry. Okay, so just a little background on Steve. Steve is the founder and CEO of Blue Room Research, a boutique research firm helping destination organizations utilize data to make better business decisions. Steve lives in Portland, Oregon. He was the director of research for Travel Portland from 2017 to 2022 and worked for Brand USA before that as the director of consumer research. Steve, so glad that you're with us today. Looking forward to all of your insights and knowledge. And we have Matt Wakefield. I mentioned him earlier. Matt is the Chief Marketing and Data Officer at Travel Tacoma. And Andi Day is the former executive director at Visit Long Beach Peninsula, as well as the former board president of State of Washington Tourism. And he is now an independent consultant specializing in strategy, development, and marketing for destinations, small businesses, and nonprofits. Matt and Andi, thanks so much for being our Washington destinations today on this webinar. I know it takes a lot to step into the limelight and to share all your knowledge and experience with folks on this webinar. So thanks again, panelists. Let's dive in. We're a few minutes behind schedule. So Molly and Lauren.
All right. Thanks, Matt. And I can understand the stress of trying to work technical IT on the background and speak at the same time. So this is so fun. I'm in the chat. I'm looking at the chat and seeing all these familiar faces and names pop up, saying hi to everyone. One of the things that's amazing about what the state of Washington tourism is doing is just building this community. And over at Datafy, we're really lucky to work with all of you and most of you and kind of understand what's going in the region and stay close to that. Matt introduced me as the Chief Experience Officer. It doesn't mean I have more experience than anybody. It's a fancy tech term for the person who's in charge of making sure that you like our product and are happy with it. And so just a little bit about Datafy. I know, I come from the DMO world. I've spent my career in it. There are so many new tools around data that there's really no sort of manual on how to use all this stuff. And so today we're really hoping to kind of dig a little bit into geolocation specifically. At Datafy, we look at geolocation as one of many data sources that can be really useful if used the right way. And I know you're going to hear from the other panelists today on tips about how to do that. The other side of really what we're looking at is how do we make data actionable? And so what we're doing at Datafy is really looking at geolocation as one of the sources where we have a lot of information about how people behave and how do we use that behavior physically for insights and how do we use that behavior to build audiences that become effective advertising audiences. So for example, you're having a new beer festival in town. How do we know who's most likely to come to that beer festival based off of how they've behaved in the past? And so everyone's going to kind of get into more specific examples of all of that. And I just wanted to thank everybody again for joining, and thanks to Matt and the rest of the panelists for letting us participate in this. I'm going to kick it to Molly. Molly is awesome. She has experience in not only tourism, but tourism specific to the state of Washington, which, when you're an outsider is always a different animal. So I'm going to pass it to her so she can kind of get a little bit more granular. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Lauren. All right, I'm going to share my screen. Right. So hopefully everyone is now seeing that.
Yeah, it looks good.
Awesome. Great. Full screen. Cool. So thanks, Lauren. Thanks, Matt. So I'm Molly, and like Matt and Lauren both mentioned, I work at Datafy. So today I'm going to be diving into an overview of what geolocation data is, provide a little bit more examples from what Lauren just described. And before joining Datafy, I worked at the Snohomish County DMO. That's where I was first exposed to geolocation data and So I know that it can be really confusing to try to figure out how to use this data to show impact. Some of you have probably worked with geolocation data before, and you might know that it can help to answer important questions. Or if you were like me when I started at the DMO, this might be a brand new concept. So before the other panelists dive into best practices, I'll just share a little more information on what this type of data is and how it can be used. So simply put, geolocation is tracking a person or object's location on Earth. And pre-2000, when we're all driving around with paper maps or MapQuest printouts, there wasn't really a great way to track visitation. There's just simply like no effective way to see where people were at. And then when cell phones came out and became ubiquitous, suddenly everyone had a mini GPS in their pocket, and that gave us geolocation data. So we went from this challenge of not being able to get enough information to suddenly having a ton of data, but there wasn't really an easy way to sort through it or figure out how to pull insights from it. So while raw data alone can be kind of meaningless, properly processed data can help tell a story. It can tell us things like what percentage of visitors are coming from out of state, how long are those people staying? Do people from Texas come to Washington in the winter? And do they ski at Stevens or at Crystal? Even though locals might complain that there's no parking in downtown Winthrop on a Saturday, the data is actually showing that the busiest day of the week is Tuesday. So here's where companies like Datafy come in. Each company does something a little bit different, and I'll talk about our process. So what Datafy does is it helps you to turn that raw data into something useful. We're a full circle platform. Our goal is for our clients to be able to move beyond that, oh, that's interesting threshold, to actually use the data to support decision-making or justify choices and spend to their stakeholders. And to get you there, what we do is we gather the data, we refine it, we sort it, and then we translate it into visuals that are hopefully easy to digest, and we put those onto our dashboard. And then that sets you up to pull visitation insights. And although there's many ways to use these insights, one of the most effective ones is through targeted digital marketing and advertising, which I will touch on a little bit later. So how does this process work? First, we'll look at gathering the data. So we essentially draw an invisible fence around a point of interest or a POI. POIs are the places that the client has identified as the most important spots to get information on. And POIs can be anything from Spokane County to the Space Needle. Generally, the larger the POI, the better chance we'll have of picking up a device within it. And POIs can be aggregated into categories, and those categories can help better represent an entire sector. So for example, we could have T-Mobile Park, Lumen Field, and Climate Pledge Arena all grouped together as pro sports. So ideally, here's how geolocation would work. You'd pick the area you're interested in, be able to see every single person that went into that area and tell us everything about them. And then Datafy could turn that into perfectly accurate graphs and charts on your live dashboard that tell you everything that you need to know. But unfortunately, it's a little bit more complicated than that. We wish that we could pick up every device that shows up in a POI. We do try, but legally we can't. And I don't think any of us want to live in a world where we are constantly tracked anyways. So what we do is the next best thing. We partner with thousands of apps, and we pick up a device when location sharing is on and the app's in use. To keep things even more private, we also aggregate and anonymize the data to a zip code level. And although we're all on our phones, probably more than we need to be, the chances of picking up a device varies on factors like the size of the POI, how long the visitor was there, and whether they were using their phone. So from the sample of devices that we pick up, our tech team then goes through a data cleaning process to get rid of any anomalies. And then they also apply algorithms to normalize that data. And part of our quality control process includes checking in with the client. So for example, you might remember the Bolt Creek fire that affected areas of Snohomish County last September. And the fire actually caused Highway 2 to be closed for about a week. So our algorithm flagged the fire event because an area that would typically have a bit of foot traffic was seeing much lower visitation than in normal years. So after we talked it through with the client, we were able to determine that the data was in fact accurate and not an anomaly that we needed to adjust. So we take all these variables into consideration, and then we statistically model the data. Our dashboard can include other feeds too. So we also include demographic data, spending data, lodging reports, and so on. And that helps paint a more complete picture. Here's an example of what the dashboard looks like. So I know there's a lot on it. We won't go through the whole thing, but I just wanted to share a few things that I think are pretty cool. First, I'll just share that the dashboard is dynamic. It runs off filters. You can see in the top left where you can adjust the date range that you're looking at. We have data dating back to 2018 up to 2 weeks ago, and the data automatically updates every week. You can adjust your distance filter, so you can view visitors coming from anywhere between 0 miles and the Atlantic Ocean. You can also narrow in on a specific POI or group of POIs. So here on the homepage, you can see visitor volume estimates, average length of stay, year-over-year visitation trends by month. Here we're looking at the top feeder markets to Metro Puget Sound, split up by seasons in 2022. So looking at this, we can see that people from Anchorage visit more in the winter, spring, and fall. But in the summer months, that's when we start to see more visitors coming in from New York or Denver. Medford's only showing up in the winter, so maybe their weather is even worse than ours. Now we're looking at the percentage of trips to Washington's national parks in 2022. So we can see the breakdown of in-state versus out-of-state visitors. I think it's pretty cool to see that there's actually more trips by out-of-state visitors than Washingtonians. And then lastly, this slide's looking at the market analysis to ski areas in Washington. And we can also see what resorts were most visited. We can see Saturday was the busiest day. But if you've ever tried to park at a ski resort on the weekend, that's probably not a surprise to you. This all said, geolocation data alone, it doesn't create the complete picture of what you would need to make decisions. The data can provide a tremendous amount of insight, but it does need to be paired with someone who's knowledgeable in their area and can interpret the data. So at Datafy, we work with folks who are looking to benefit from understanding the who and when of visitation and to turn those insights into impact. So some of our clients are DMOs, economic development departments, state tourism boards, transportation bureaus, attractions like a museum. And our upcoming panelists are all experts in this, and they're going to dive deeper into best practices for using this data and getting insights on it. And those can help support decisions on things like management, economic development, or marketing. All right, so now you have your dashboard, and we want you to have your aha moment by looking at the past up to the present to get a better idea of what's working or what could be better. And we do know that, of course, it's important to be able to demonstrate out to your stakeholders things like where you're seeing ROI, identifying opportunities and seeing trends. So here we've put together a few report templates to help share that information. So what's next? Now you have a better understanding of what's going on, but what can you do with it? So that depends completely on you and what your goals are. Our goal is, or our hope, sorry, is that you can use those insights to help develop and execute your strategy. One way that we've seen be very effective is through programmatic advertising, which just by chance we can help you with. So here's how this works. So every device has universal ID. And when we collect devices for data, we store those IDs. So a universal ID has information tied to it about the device user. So for example, my universal ID would show that I'm a female in my 30s. I live in Seattle. I spend time in the mountains and I visit breweries. So that's me. And there's a profile just like that for everyone that has a device. And then using this information and combining it with the data dashboard to get information on market insights or seasonal visitation trends, we can build specific audiences that are customized for each campaign. And those audiences are people that we believe are most likely to convert to a visitor. So that's could be re-engaging with past visitors, geo-conquesting visitors from a competitor's destination, or creating a lookalike audience. And each universal ID that matches that audience goes into a group, and we serve an ad specifically to devices within that group. So one of the really nice things about this process is that it's far easier to directly correlate ad spend to ROI. So using the geolocation data, we can actually see whether someone that we served an ad to showed up in the destination. And this type of behavioral targeting can lead to a more efficient marketing spend. That's because instead of serving an ad out at random to just anybody with a device, we're serving that ad to a specific group of people that are more likely to be potential visitors. And of course, then the physical attribution can show the real impact of a DMO's efforts back to stakeholders. So that's everything I have. Thanks. And I'm excited to hear from the other panelists.
Thanks, Molly and Lauren. I just wanted to let folks know on the call, the reason why Datafy is on here, not because Lauren and Molly are extra special and experts in their fields, but State of Washington Tourism also has a co-op through Datafy, which tracks visitors based on points of interest, mobile geolocation data, and credit card information. In addition to negotiating the discount, rural communities and counties qualify for additional subsidy from SWT. For more information on all of that, you can contact Michelle Thana. She's Director of Marketing at SWT. And Marianne, if you can pop her email address in the chat, that would be great. Thanks, folks. We'll move on to Steve. How about you go next?
Great, thanks, Matt. I appreciate it. I'm going to share my screen with everybody. If everyone can let me know that they can see that.
Yeah, you're all
Great,
good.
appreciate it. All right. But as Matt said, my name is Steve Halasz. I'm founder and CEO of Blue Room Research, and my firm specializes in helping small and medium-sized DMOs with all their data needs. And so I wanted to kind of give a 30,000-foot overview of how I think about working with clients and how I think about using all data, but specifically geolocation data. And what I encourage my clients to do, first of all, is determine what metrics matter to them and their stakeholders. There's so many metrics in the tourism world now that you can use. You really need to focus your efforts, right? There's length of stay, there's heads and beds and room nights, there's pushing beyond the gateways, there's repeat visitation. I could go on and on. I find that really focusing on those important ones for your destination really kind of trims the fat, allows you to focus and really put your head down and focus on where you need to. I also encourage my clients to, when they start out, to ignore the glam metrics. And what I mean by glam metrics are some of those big, huge numbers that don't really tell you anything. And I feel like a lot of the data sources in the tourism industry have that. Specific within geolocation, it's person trips. If you told the average individual, my destination saw 2 million person trips, they wouldn't exactly understand what that means. They can't really do anything with it. And I kind of equate that to, I think we're all probably familiar with the marketing and advertising world, where if you say a marketing campaign drove 2 billion impressions, what does that actually mean? Did I get anything for my money? Did I get an ROI on it? And so some of the metrics within the tourism world, I think, are kind of glamby. They don't really mean a lot. I encourage them to focus on more tangible, simplistic things that move the needle with people and are much more easy to understand. Focus on metrics that allow you to decide and create better business decisions for you and your stakeholders. Next, I think it's really important when you start working with geolocation data to have a reality check and manage your expectations. I think, in the last few years, geolocation data has really proliferated. There's been a bunch of firms that have started and provide this data. I think maybe 10% of the problem, this is my personal opinion, is on those firms. I think maybe when they started out, it was overpromised and oversold a little bit. However, I blame the industry for the other 90%, and it's people like me, researchers who are really hoping that geolocation was the holy grail, the one metrics where now I had transactional data, in essence, a fence around my destination where I could get that really hard data. And so I think the expectations were one thing and what it actually is a little bit different. That said, geolocation data is fantastic. I believe it's personally the best industry in our industry, or best data in our industry. It's extremely powerful. And so, as the expression goes, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You just need to figure out how to use it and what to use it for. And also remember, I think we need to have a little compassion for these companies, right? COVID changed everything. These companies do modeling based on person movements. And over the past 3 years, those have gone crazy, right? People went from going to city destinations to rural destinations, everything flip-flopped. So it's incredibly difficult for them to model their data. And then on top of that, you have the iOS updates that Apple instituted, where they're getting a smaller sample size, less apps, more opt-outs, all those kinds of things. So modeling is incredibly difficult. And I personally would not want to trade places with any of the chief data officers or chief technology officers at any of the companies that provide geolocation data. I think that would be an absolute nightmare and a really, really difficult job. Next, pushback can be a good thing. Not all data you present is going to be universally accepted. Pushback also equals engagement. People push back because they care, they want to get it right, it means something. And so I think you need to embrace the pushback when you do get it, and know that you're not going to persuade everyone with your data. And I'll tell a little quick story here. I work with a ski town destination that's had explosive growth in the past 3 years. And we showed their stakeholders hotel data, everything's up. Short-term rental data, everything up. Geolocation data, foot traffic up. Highway traffic, airport traffic, everything up exponentially. But one of the stakeholders wouldn't believe that there was more tourists in the destination because his best friend ran the water and sewage treatment plant and toilet flushes weren't up proportionally. Not arguing that could be a good metrics to use, it's probably viable. But again, if all the metrics are telling you one thing and one person has, dead set on holding out on the other, you're not going to persuade that person. So just realize that even if you show crystal clear data, not everyone may be on board with you. Next, really learn to use the tool that you have. Geolocation is layered, it's nuanced, it's incredibly powerful. Take the time to learn the tool and you will get good results. And remember, and I think Lauren mentioned this, geolocation isn't your only tool in your tool belt. Most destinations are relying on a smattering of data sources, and that's where expertise comes into play. You really have to balance them to tell the story. And as my dad used to say, use a hammer for nails and a screwdriver for screws. Use the right tool to tell you the right thing. Next, ask lots of questions and use your vendor. They are experts. Almost all of them are fantastic at their jobs across all the geolocation data providers. Almost all of them want to help. They want to earn your business. They want you to renew your contract. They want to help you. They want to make their product sticky. So use them. They will help you. Next, I think it's worth noting that you need to accept that any data source and any data analysis, but especially geolocation data, takes more time than you might initially think. Just because there's a dashboard does not mean that every amazing insight that you're looking for is a click away. I spend hours of my time for clients exporting dashboard results and doing additional layering and additional cutting to really get to those next level insights. And next, polygons are destined to be redrawn. A lot of times I work with clients and what initially was onboarded with where, how we drew the polygons, it just didn't work out for us. And whether it's sample size, how we thought about it, how we chose it, ultimately it doesn't matter, but know that you might have to go back to the drawing board and get things working for you. And you're going to need to draw those POIs. Next, I encourage you to network and talk about data. There are more experts around you than you even know, and there's no need to reinvent the wheel. When I was at Travel Portland, I was talking to my counterpart at Visit Seattle. And he was describing this model he built that took him hours and days to work out, but it was really impactful. And I said to him, wow, I think I should do the same thing. I'm just not looking forward to doing it because it's going to take so much time. He said, oh, I'll just send you mine. No need to reinvent the wheel. Just take mine, input your data, you're good to go. I'll save you hours of your time. It's like, that's amazing. And in my opinion, working with DMOs, I'm continually surprised and amazed at how friendly and collegial this industry is. And so I think everyone should lean on that. Next, when getting started, I think less is more. Small destinations need big polygons. Get the sample size, make sure you have the sample size you need, and then you can start to add more polygons, refine them, etc. I encourage you to nail down and nail a few metrics that you're really going to focus on, and then kind of go back to the drawing board and add more and evolve over time. And realize that research is a journey, not a destination. I'm always redrawing polygons. I'm always finding new ways to look at data. You're never done. And then lastly, and perhaps most importantly, know all you tell, but don't tell all you know. Too much data is not necessarily a good thing. You really need to know your audience. You need to read the room when you're presenting to your stakeholders and your board and understand, is this a mom and pop restaurant that's never seen hotel data before? Or is it a public official who reads it all the time and really knows it? So really understand who you're presenting to and spoon feed them the right amount of data. I'd also encourage you not to surprise people with data. You may think you're coming through with a big aha or a big reveal. You don't want it to fall flat. I've had this happen to me several times, and people disagree with the data and it didn't really go well. So I'd encourage you to back channel and make sure you're showing people data ahead of time before that big reveal, so you don't have that wah moment that really stings in front of everyone. And lastly, realize that your staff and stakeholders need to be brought along for the ride. And this is incredibly challenging, but also really rewarding to understand them, meet them where they're at, and build and grow and encourage them to learn more, encourage them to engage more. And I find that data in all its forms, but especially geolocation, is a fantastic tool to do that. And I've had a lot of success in the destinations I work with by extending the olive branch, pumping out data, having those meetings, letting people ask questions to get engagement from stakeholders. And it's been incredibly helpful. So that's my time. I'll hand it over to Andi now. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you everyone for joining us today. It's so nice to see all these great friends and colleagues on the line. And thanks, Matt and Marianne, for pulling this together. So yeah, we were able to, thanks to that great co-op program available through the State of Washington Tourism, we were able to sign on with this program pretty early on, as soon as it was first offered. And I got to tell you too, there was something that we had been shopping around for years, and there was nothing comparable that would have been within our budget, not even remotely. So the co-op program, was really a game changer for us. And we really appreciated that. But we used it for several different things, and I think probably obviously was to inform our plans and our strategies, and also to evaluate our plans and strategies. And for that, we're especially looking at using the origins data and the demographics data. And I think, we also, of course, it's been mentioned, the reporting. So really helpful tool, preparing reports for your board, for annual meetings, and for, your funding partners, whenever you go in every year to make that pitch to the LTAC committee, or, stakeholder partners. It was very helpful. And side note, you should form your polygons around that. And then also for partner organizations, when you go into meet with a chamber or merchant organization, for example, it was always great to pull a slide before you went in and be able to share some information for them that was relevant and useful to them. We also used it a lot to implement plans and campaigns. So it really helped us, having limited lean resources, we really needed to hyper target. the audience that, had either been before or we knew was aligned with our visitor persona and profile. And so this, enabled us to really drill in and figure out where to apply our resources, and not just, through Datafy itself, but also omni-channel and all of our other marketing channels as well. And that really increases, our ROI. And it's very helpful with, I think, when you have limited resources, you can't go with the shotgun approach. You have to really hone in and identify, likely conversions and candidates, and use your resources in the best manner possible. Another thing that we used it for that I didn't really realize was going to be a thing until we had it, was to inform policy. And by that, I mean, a lot of our electives, they're having to make decisions. And there were a couple instances in where we were able to pull reports that helped, and it didn't make a huge difference as far as it didn't determine the policy, but it helped them make a more informed decision. And I would say specifically the example was around our county commissioners, and when our city council were making decisions around fireworks on the 4th of July. And so we were able to, show them year over year data that was pretty enlightening, I think, not just for our communities, but for our comp sets. And so that was a really useful application. And then, of course, I think a lot of rural areas, one of our cornerstones of our tourism is our events. This was especially useful for events, although maybe not in the way people would think. But what it was really helpful for was determining, we would work with those planners and say if they were trying to choose a date, we would help them identify a time when there was, room for growth, if it was a tourism driving event, where there was occupancy, where there was capacity, or if it was more of a fundraising or community event, we could help them identify where there was, a high level of people around, and an existing audience, if you will. The other thing too would be, we had an event, they were trying to decide whether they should do Friday, Saturday, or Saturday, Sunday. And so we were able to really drill into those days and look historically and discover that, and it was a little counterintuitive for us, but that Friday was indeed much busier than Sunday. So it's, those are the types of things that we use it for. As far as the event itself, I would say it's very useful to layer it in with other data. So use it in combination with your admissions, or with your sample survey, or and the reason being for that is most events don't, some do, but most don't really lend themselves to a clean polygon. And so that's why I would say, it's definitely a factor, but layer it in with other data sources. And so a lot of you too in the DMO world, at the tourism conference this fall, we had the workshop about how, the shift of DMOs being, considered a tourism asset and a community partner is what I meant to say. And so this was something that we were able to provide as a community resource. So providing support materials for our stakeholder partners that were applying for other grants, for example, or programs. And another example too, would never have seen this coming, but we had Senator Cantwell come to our community, and we were talking about our internet access. And so that our service level was based on our resident population. And so I was able to demonstrate through a data report that any given day of the year, we had 3 to 7 times our base population in our area. And therefore, that was the capacity that we needed to, maintain our economic level and let alone grow. So there were a lot of things like that we didn't even realize we were going to be using this for. And so I think it's an incredible tool. That being said, and I think other people have alluded to this, I think it does need to be layered with other sources to truly be effective. And I think, we learned a lot about polygons. It's interesting, the things that Steve mentioned. I'm like, yeah, we did that. Yeah, we did that. We made a lot of mistakes. And we went polygon crazy at first, but really realized we're using like 10. And that was all we needed. And then I think too, I'd love to, we never really had the opportunity, but to do advertising through the platform. And I think that's something really exciting and I would love to do, but I think I will hand it over to Matt and he can talk more about that.
Cool. Thanks, Andi. I just want to see if I can share my screen here because I'm horrible at this. And half the time I end up sharing my calculator, which is like the most embarrassing part of my computer because people can see how bad I am at math and it's really embarrassing. So here we go, going to try this. You guys see the Mountain City Sea? Yes?
Yep, looks good, Matt.
Oh, thank God. All right, so what I'm going to talk about here is more about the marketing side of geolocation as opposed to the data side. That's kind of how we differentiate it within our walls is there's data on one hand and then marketing on the other. The information coming in and information going out. And then ideally when the information goes out, part of it comes back. And I'll talk about that in just a second. But so let me see, change slides. So marketing with geolocation kind of gets a bad rap sometimes because everyone has a story about being near McDonald's and then starting to see McDonald's ads, and then worse, they're seeing ads for Burger King. So sometimes it's paranoia, sometimes it's just good advertising because like Lauren said earlier, marketing based on past behavior is way more effective and cost effective than marketing by demographics or geography. So, but this isn't something like near future. The marketing part of this is not something that's near future dystopian. It's not the Matrix. I mean, it's not like as much as it can feel like the Matrix. It's not really like, it's not something to be concerned about. It's not also the end all be all for marketing, but what it did is it transformed our relationship with our stakeholders. So we're kind of big fans of the marketing side of it here. And basically leisure tourism was something that we weren't able to measure. And we got dinged on our funding because of that, because we couldn't tell how many heads and beds it put. We needed an ironclad ROI and something that could show that what we were doing in marketing was actually generating heads and beds. So we got a new CEO in, Dean Burke, and with his leadership, we were able to find a solution that met the need for like trackable, provable ROI in terms of room nights, which was like, it changed everything about the way we do business here. So that's, I guess, probably why they invited me here. And I only mentioned this because I think maybe some of you can find yourselves in various parts of that journey as well. So anyway, the way we use it for marketing, I guess, let's see. I guess we could call it the Trinity of geolocation. Again, it's not like a super scary Matrix kind of thing, but you can call it neo-marketing. I don't know.
Nice.
But sorry, yeah, I had to do it. But I just want to mention that we chose to work with Datafy specifically because they can help with all parts of this journey that I'm going to get into in just a second here, from the ideation to like on what's driving tourism to ad design and the rest of it. But anyway, we use geolocation to, first of all, develop itineraries. This is our entire marketing program is seasonal itinerary based. So we look at the destination data, look at the dashboard that Andi was talking about. Where do people visit in which seasons? If families are visiting Mount Rainier during spring break, we see a lot of that in the data. So maybe we create a family-focused spring campaign, maybe Dr. Seuss themed, that incorporates like the small gateway towns around there. We group those together, those points of interest together into a theme, and that theme becomes an itinerary, and then we market that itinerary. we use the geolocation also to build ad audiences. And so that Dr. Seuss itinerary can target people with households of 3 to 5 people who live 50 miles away from Pierce County and who have visited stops. So anyway, that's interesting, but it's not the most interesting part of this. The most interesting part is that now we're using website visitors. We put a universal pixel on our website that enables us to target people with ads who have visited our website, which are people who are already predisposed to what we're showing them. So it has a much higher ROI on that. And so that's something we've just experimenting with now. And it also enables us to use QR codes that drive people to our website and then we can track someone that scanned a QR code on one of our ads, maybe a print ad, maybe, and then we can target them with ads. So it enables us to use funds to generate room nights in ways we haven't ever been able to do before. So we're excited about that. And then it helps us deliver those ads. And that's kind of standard. Datafy built a custom built DSP, which is amazing for us, but we're also trying connected TV this year. So wish us luck on that. But then the way to close this is that the attribution is the biggest part of this for us. We're finally able, like we could say, did people who interacted with our ad then visit Pierce County? Did they stay in paid lodging? How long did they stay in paid lodging? And you multiply those together, and that's the room nights that we can report back to our funders, which is something we've never been able to do before. Like, this ad generated this many room nights. And it's probably most important that it's an ultra conservative number. Could we target everyone who came to Pierce County originally? No, not at all. Geolocation just doesn't work like that. Could we count attribution from everybody we targeted who came to Pierce County and stayed in paid lodging? No, we can't do that either. People use their devices in really weird ways. But do we also make sure our stakeholders know that we're only reporting on the most conservative metrics? Yeah, you bet we do. So overall, I'll just keep it pretty simple with this little loop here. But overall, if you're already using Datafy, I'd really recommend you talk to your Datafy rep about how to ramp up a marketing program that's based on the dashboard that you have. If you don't have a Datafy rep, maybe you start by getting one. But so I guess that's kind of the really short version of it. And I guess I could show this is what our flow chart looks like of how our marketing program works. This is just the back end of everything, basically, how public relations can link into geolocation marketing, how print, visitor guide, social media all can link into geolocation. And I told myself I wasn't going to show this because it requires way too much explanation, but it is what it is.
Thanks, Matt. We appreciate it.
Yeah, right back to you.
Okay, excellent. Folks, we are less than 10 minutes left in the webinar today. We'll open it up to questions from the audience. We'll keep an eye on the chat. Let me send the first question off to Andi, though. I'll get us started first and prime the pump for our audience members. I saw, Lauren, you answered a question from Dan. Thank you for that. Andi, going back to Steve's point and sharing information to tourism stakeholders in your area, what obstacles or what successes did you have sharing types of information or amounts of information with all your tourism stakeholders? Was it just with your board of directors, or was it other folks in the community, restaurateurs, hoteliers? How did you kind of manage, or how were you kind of the gatekeeper of all this information, and how did you interpret it and explain it to folks in your community?
Yeah. So I tried to always, whenever I was speaking to a community group, I would, prepare some reports that I thought would be relevant for that group. And then anytime we were putting in a proposal for a project or for funding of any kind, I would make sure to include reports that, again, I thought would be relevant to that audience or partner. but it was really great to, you know, it's so funny. I think it was Steve, and I've heard Matt say it too. It's like, you got to be careful. As far as, you know, sometimes people don't want to see everything or aren't ready for it, or things can be misconstrued. So, you know, it's important to be mindful and know who you're presenting to and what will be important for them. And, you know, not to do things that will be divisive, but I tried to really use it to unify the destination, right? So, and I think a lot of us in DMO work can identify with this, but every kind of community or village feels like they don't get quite enough. And so it's that kind of sibling effect, right? And so I thought this was always a way, especially the correlation data was so valuable to be able to go into, you know, a village or a community group or a city council and say, look, these are all the people that visited Washington State Parks, our Cape Disappointment State Park, and also came to your city. And by the way, they also visited this other part of the county. So it was a way to demonstrate to folks that we are a comprehensive destination. So that's one example. But you know, so many uses and such a great tool. And it was one of the things too, I mean, I'd never had enough time. I love it, and I love being in the platform, and I always learn so much. But it does take time, and I would say too, it's important to have someone who's dedicated and trained. In it's like you can't just go in. I mean, it always takes longer because they're, you know, it's something you need to be very mindful.
For sure. Good point. Good point. Matt, let me pivot to you and then we'll open it up to the audience. What obstacles did you overcome, or how did you kind of win over skeptical stakeholders in your neck of the woods in terms of geolocation data and the advertising associated with those metrics and KPIs?
Yeah, it was, I mean, first and foremost, having leadership that was going to champion this from the top. Like I said, our CEO, Dean, was like, he bought into it as soon as I did, and went all in on it. And then he has a stakeholder newsletter that he sends out, and he started sending out tidbits of the data with that, but just bite-sized pieces that encouraged more. And so like having that regular conversation about it got us to the point where we weren't even allowed to talk at a funding meeting. Like, we weren't allowed to talk because it was we weren't on the board, and someone there was so well versed in it through those newsletters that they were able to champion for us without us saying a word. And
nice.
I feel like that's when we realized the steady flow of communication about these things and keeping using the phrases, the geolocation data, as well as the one-on-one conversations with people who maybe looked like they didn't get it. But overall that, and then like showing data that reflected what they knew was happening in reality, like showing that when people can connect the data to what they see with their own eyes, that's why like sports marketing is so easy here, because you see people in uniforms and you see their data reports on those guys and you're like, oh, I saw those people in uniforms walking around town, I know they had an impact. We didn't have that with leisure visitors because they don't wear uniforms and they don't have badges. So that's, yeah, being able to connect the numbers of visitors you're bringing with marketing and communicating those numbers to the people in the hotels who are seeing that, who are usually the voting members of the boards. So steady communication, man, all the way.
Great, good point, good point. Okay, Marianne, we had a few questions come in from the audience. Do you have one that we can share?
Yeah, so someone was wondering about or if you're able to track the spending patterns of hotel guests, for example, where they tend to go and visit and the amount they spend at those places they visit.
I can take that one. So we do, through the State of Washington Tourism Co-op, we do also include credit card data, which comes from MasterCard, and it's 34% of all credit and debit cards in the United States. But to that question specifically, we don't link credit card data and geolocation for privacy purposes. You can't really look to the level of one person and what they're spending and link that to their their home location, that's pretty much a violation of privacy. So what we can do is look at correlation between where hotel guests spend time. So are they seen at the hotel, and are they seen in your downtown corridor? Are they seen at the hotel and seen at your wineries? So it's really more, the sort of correlation of one person being observed one place and being observed another place. As far as spending data goes, currently we just look at an aggregate, how is that broken down? So, maybe you have more people visiting from one particular DMA, but people from another DMA represent more percentage share of the spend. And I think that we are going to get more and more sophisticated with that data in the next 6 months. So I hope that answers, whose question was that? Audrey's question.
Great, thanks, Lauren.
There is another question in the chat about kind of coming from a smaller DMO. Are there contractors, gig workers, or anyone that specializes in this data marketing? I think some people are curious about the cost of Datafy outside of the co-op or both with the co-op. And so Molly or Lauren, if you would mind possibly putting your emails in the chat, just so people can reach out to you if they have questions about pricing.
Yep. And so just for really briefly, the dashboard is an annual subscription as part of this SWT. Can I say that? I kind of want to say SWV because I'm a 90s girl, so I have to train myself to say SWT. SWT co-op Datafy automatically gives 20% off to anyone and includes the credit card spending data at no cost. And then I think Matt mentioned that for some of the rural or smaller populated cities and counties, there is also a 30% contribution to the individual DMO, but it's based off of a population threshold. So if you're a city under 20,000 or a county under 100,000, that's sort of the current qualification. And so we can kind of give you custom pricing based off of those sort of factors. The other one about consultants who work on this data, there's 2 of them on this call. So I would like to give a friendly plug to my friends Andi and Steve, who are both really well versed in this and both have kind of very different experience, but very valuable experience, and I'm sure would be happy to do audits on what you've got and how to use it. So I'm a business development person, it doesn't matter if it's for me or whoever, right?
Nice, Lauren. Yeah, we appreciate that. And folks, we did get off to a late start, and I apologize for the technical difficulties. I've talked to the panelists. They don't have a hard stop at 11. Now it's 11:01. So we can hang on for a few more minutes. If you have questions that you'd like to pop in the chat and ask them, we can stay on for another few minutes or so.
One thing too, while we're waiting on that, I was, as a board member, I was involved in when we were, initially shopping this out and comparing other programs that were available. And I got to tell you, and my role on the board has always been the advocate of rural destinations. But it's really hard to find a data product that works well for rural areas. And using Pacific County as an example, we only have 22,000 residents, but we see nearly 1.5 overnight visitors a year. And so algorithms from an urban area do not work for us. The other thing that's kind of unique about us is we don't have any industry, we don't have any higher education, we don't have a conference center, we don't have a prison. Like, there is no built-in visitor industry aside from our leisure tourism. And almost every other product makes that assumption. And the other thing is that, and I know several of you on this call share this, is that we're a border county to Oregon. So a lot of times, the default setting on most other programs is that there's a higher amount of local spending than there actually is. So those are some of the reasons, for me that made this program a really good fit for us.
And I have not seen any further questions come into the chat. So I think we might be good to wrap up.
Excellent. Okay. Well, thanks, folks. I had a great time today. I hope everyone else learned just as much as I did. Again, a recording of this webinar will be emailed out to registrants. It will also be posted on the SWT YouTube channel. You'll also be able to contact these folks for follow-up questions if you like. Thanks again, Andi, Matt, Molly, Lauren, and Steve. And folks, stay tuned next month in February for the next Tourism Skillshop on regenerative travel and how those experiences trickle down all the way to the destination level and include hotels, tour operators, and the DMO. So stay tuned for that. We'll let you know if that will be on the 3rd or 4th Thursday of February. But thanks again and see you soon. Take care, everyone.